Welcome, everybody. My name is Hanan Weissman, and I had the discreet honor of serving as the White House liaison to the American Jewish community. We are thrilled to see so many of you who joined us from around the country for this second annual virtual White House Seder of the Biden-Harris administration. Ma nishtana halayla hazeh mikol haleilot. Why? Why is this night different from all other nights? Because this evening we are hosting the People's Seder, where in addition to the President, the First Lady, the Vice President, and of course, the Second Gentleman, we will also hear from Jewish Americans from around the country. To help us begin, we are honored to have the first and second graders from the Shefa School, a Jewish community day school based in Manhattan that offers students with language-based learning disabilities a place to grow, thrive, and reach their full potential. The children of the Shefa School will begin this Seder service, as we have done for centuries, with a singing rendition of Kadesh or Chatz.
Good evening to the thousands of you who are joining us from around the country for this special event. Welcome to the Biden-Harris administration's second virtual White House Seder. I've got to admit, I've been looking forward to hosting this event since we did this last year. And over the past year, I've had the honor of visiting people from communities all across the country. I've been touched by how many people have made a point to tell me how much last year's virtual Seder meant to them and to their entire family. Now, admittedly, two of those people were my parents, Mike and Barb. Hi, Mom and Dad. But believe me, they weren't alone. So many people tell me how meaningful it was to see the White House celebrate with them and honor their traditions. Others told me they recorded the event and watched it as a family when they gathered for their own Seder. Now, everyone here at the White House was so moved to know that our virtual gathering made such an impact. And that's why this year, we're calling our virtual Seder the People's Seder at the People's House. Passover is, and always has been, my favorite Jewish holiday. And it's not just because of the gelatinous gefilte fish, and I love mine with horseradish, by the way. It's because ever since I was a kid, I've been inspired by the story of Exodus, whose retelling serves as the heart of our Seder experience. And I know I'm not alone. Generations of my ancestors, and many of yours, have turned to the redemptive promise of the Passover narrative as a source of hope, to endure prejudice, persecution, and pogroms, to survive expulsions and to seek emancipation, to believe in a possibility of a promised land, and to know it's not beyond your reach. So even as the Exodus tells the story of a particular people, its message is universal. It's a story that is as timeless as it is timely. A story that nourished the aspirations of our founding fathers who sought to liberate a people from foreign rule. It's a story that makes me think about people facing war and conflict in communities around the world, including the brave people of Ukraine. Throughout the ages, the Exodus has helped people across all walks of life weather the indignity of their circumstance and allow them to hold on to the possibility that, yes, a better tomorrow is still ahead. Each Passover, we are asked to not only retell an ancient story, but to give it new meaning by adding to it with our own story. I thought about this a lot yesterday when I met with a group of unbelievable, dynamic 8th grade students at a Jewish day school right here in DC. We talked about the importance of Passover. The reflections that they shared were wise beyond their years. They talked about perseverance, how the Passover story reminds us all that even during the most difficult times, there was always hope. They shared how they witnessed perseverance throughout the pandemic. They talked about the power of questioning. Why do we ask the same questions each year during our Seder? And they reminded me that it's because each year we grow and have a deeper understanding of what the answers to those questions are. Lastly, they talked about that inevitable moment when someone falls asleep at the Seder table. You all know that scene. We've all been there before. But they rightly pointed out that one shouldn't sleep at the Seder, not even doze, just like one shouldn't sleep in the act of protecting our democracy. Full and active participation in our Seder and in one's democracy ultimately strengthens both. So, this evening, just as the 8th graders did yesterday, we will reflect. We will continue to build our stories, and we will make the Seder relevant to our world today. Throughout this virtual event, we will hear from a variety of voices who construct the wonderful mosaic that is the American Jewish community and experience. Rabbis and university presidents, historians and chefs, school children, military choirs, and Broadway actors. And we're so honored that you are all tuning in to join us as we prepare for the first night of Passover tomorrow night. But first, let us begin here. It is a true honor to invite the President of the United States, Joe Biden, and the First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, to share a few opening words.
Happy Passover to all who celebrate in America, Israel, and around the world.
Every year, Jewish families gather to remember the Exodus from Egypt, bringing their victories and triumphs, fears and hopes to the Passover table, and discovering new truths in ancient traditions.
So thanks to the progress made during the pandemic, we're grateful that this year's Passover marks the first time in 3 years that many families and friends sit around the Seder table together again.
The stories of miracles and blessings and spiritual discoveries are what we've gathered from Jewish Americans across the country this year as we celebrate the People's Seder here at the People's House. Because at the Seder, we share the journey from bondage to freedom that has been repeated from generation to generation. With faith, the driest desert can be crossed and the mightiest sea can be split. Hope never stops marching towards the promised land.
And during this holiday, our hearts with the people of Ukraine and all the people who are fighting for freedom. May the spirit of Passover, deliverance from oppression, carry you forward and give you strength.
No matter the path we've taken, we know that there is hope and healing ahead. As is said at the Passover table, all those who are hungry, let them come and eat. All who are in need, let them come and celebrate Passover.
May God bless you all during this season of renewal, this festival of freedom. From our family to yours, Hag Sameach.
Thank you, President Biden, and thank you to the First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, for those inspiring remarks. Now, you know that no formal meal in the Jewish tradition begins without a blessing over the wine. And if you're not old enough, with some grape juice. Kaddish is the first part of the Seder experience. And here to join us in speaking about Kaddish and in reciting the Kiddush is cantor David Fromer, the Jewish chaplain at West Point.
Thank you, Hanan. What an honor to be joining this event from here at the West Point Jewish Chapel, where the U.S. Military Academy's Jewish cadets come to deepen their connection to Judaism and strengthen their commitment to serving our country as leaders of character for the Army and beyond. Our Seder formally begins with Kaddish, the blessing over the first of 4 cups of wine that are traditionally consumed throughout the evening. Wine is Judaism's foremost symbol of joy, We associate it with our most festive holidays and with the sweetness of Shabbat. It is integral to our celebrations of weddings and B'nai Mitzvah. And the book of Judges even relates that God is cheered by wine just as people are. On each of these happy occasions, we recite a blessing over the wine, the Kiddush, or Kiddush, or at the Seder, Kadesh. With all this emphasis on happiness and celebration, we might expect that word Kiddush to mean something like cocktail hour, or let the good times roll. And yet its meaning reveals that there is more to wine in Judaism than simply having a good time. Because the word Kiddush means holiness and reminds us that true joy in life must be infused with both gratitude and purpose. Passover in general, and the Kiddush specifically, are meant to instruct the Jewish people about our particular relationship to these universal ideas. As Jews, our gratitude stems from our redemption from slavery, Yitziat Mitzrayim, from our historical memory of suffering and the terrible effects of oppression. On Passover, we celebrate our freedom, Zman Cherutenu, but our celebration is incomplete unless we ask the question, what is our freedom for? What are we free to do? The Kiddush says that we are chosen by God from all the peoples, Mikol Ha'amim, not because we are better than anyone else, but because our historical memory of suffering compels us to work towards a better world for everyone. As Jews, our purpose is to serve, whether in government, the military, in nonprofits, as volunteers, as philanthropists, however we can, until, as the Haggadah says, all who are hungry may eat. And as the prophet Micah describes, and George Washington famously quoted, until all may sit under their own vine and fig tree, and none shall make them afraid. As we recite Kiddush, this blessing over the wine, we celebrate the joy of our redemption, but we also rededicate ourselves to the holy purpose of repairing the world, that those who still suffer may soon share in its joys as well. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'am, veromamanu mikol lashon, v'kideshanu b'mitzvotav. Vatiten lanu Adonai Eloheinu be'ahava, moadim l'simcha, chagim uzmanim l'sason. Et yom chag hamatzot hazeh, zman cherutenu mikra kodesh, zecher litziat Mitzrayim. Kivanu v'acharta, ve'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim. Umoadei kodshecha, besimcha ufsason hinchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai, mekadesh Yisrael v'hazmanim. L'chaim and Chag Sameach.
I am in Chag Sameach. Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Cantor Fromer. Now, if there is one defining feature of this Seder, it's this. There is a clear order to the service. In fact, there are 15 discrete components to the Seder. But this is what we call a mock Seder, preparation for the real thing tomorrow night. And as a result, we have the luxury of skipping orchatz, the ritual washing of hands, and jumping to karpas, eating a vegetable dipped in water. Here to explain the message and meaning of karpas is Dr. Andrew Refeld, the president of Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, which since 1875 has served as North America's leading institution of higher Jewish education and a leadership development center of Reform Judaism.
What a joy it is to be with all of you to celebrate this People's Seder together. We come now to the next part of the Seder, karpas, and we dip a green vegetable into salt water, a reminder of hope, the promise of renewal in the spring. Symbolically, the salt water reminds us of the tears our people shed while in bondage. The ritual transports us as we become those slaves again. For we are told that on this night, the exodus to freedom is not something that happens to others. It's something that happens to us right now around the Seder table. But why begin the evening with such an odd ritual? Rabbi Jonathan Sachs of blessed memory suggests an answer in his Haggadah. By starting with something so unusual, we elevate and light the spark of curiosity in our children, preparing them to ask later, why is this night so different from all others? Curiosity creates and sustains free societies as well. While the exodus from Egypt marked our freedom from slavery, as we crossed the parted sea to our liberation, we must surely have wondered curiously, what was next? For what purpose would we use our newfound freedom? It was only when our hearts and minds were open and curious that we could willingly choose what to do with that freedom, to accept a covenant that would reform us as the Jewish people. True freedom from slavery is thus marked by the free exercise of our intellect, to engage with the play of ideas freely, to follow them wherever those ideas may take us, and not to value ideas simply because they are our own, nor be enslaved to ideas simply because our friends accept them as true. Imagine what would happen today if we treated the differences of ideas with the curiosity that the Seder inspires. Curiosity requires humility, the humility to ask first, what if I or we are mistaken, not you? Even when these ideas concern the most important commitments of our lives. Being curious promotes empathy, for when we are curious, we ask without incrimination, what do others see of value in their ideas? Why are those ideas important to them? And when we are curious, we focus less on who said what and more on what was said. Depersonalizing our increasingly corrosive and bullying civil discourse. So as we dip Karpas this year at the Seder, inspired by the promise of spring renewal and remembering that we were once slaves in Egypt, we embrace that spirit of curiosity, cultivating humility and empathy, enough necessary to strengthen our Jewish communities and the fragile civil society upon which our freedom now depends. Chag Pesach Sameach.
Chag Sameach to you, and thank you, Dr. Reffeld. At this point in the Seder, we turn to Yachatz, where we traditionally take 3 matzahs and break the middle one. It is an act rife with symbolism. We deliberately asked our next speaker to share some words about this section, not just because Deborah Lipstadt is a world-renowned historian of the Holocaust and anti-Semitism, someone who has spent her career studying the brokenness of societies, but also because her nomination to serve as the State Department's special envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism, now with the rank of ambassador, actually unified the American Jewish community in remarkable and profound ways. It is a great honor to finally welcome Ambassador-designate Deborah Lipstadt to share her first public words since her Senate confirmation several weeks ago.
Thank you, Hanan. When I was young, my mother would passionately describe how her father, an Orthodox Jew living in Detroit in the 1920s, would wait for the arrival from New York of a shipment of shmura matzahs, the special handmade matzahs in which the wheat has been carefully watched to ensure that there was no leaven. He would carefully open the package to see if there were 6 whole unbroken matzahs, 3 for each night. If any one was broken, it could not be used to fulfill the Seder ritual. The family would gather for the Seder, and shortly after the Kiddush, he would take one of those precious matzahs whose wholeness was crucial to their use, lift it up, and break it. It seems to make no sense. How might we understand this act? I think it tells us that the world is always in some form of balance or imbalance between wholeness and brokenness. This past month, it has been terribly broken. All around us, we see pain, suffering, killings, attacks on children and civilians. And so many of us individually are broken in ways that are invisible to others. The Hebrew scriptures, the Torah, instructs us to gather together with our families. And if our families are too small, to gather together with others in our community. Gather together to celebrate. It's easy to be oblivious to this brokenness. But the Seder ritual of Yachas ensures that we are not. As we break the matzah, let us think of those whose lives are so broken, who are even now in pain, whether it is in a war zone or in a private place. But reflect also on the fact that we set aside the larger piece of that broken matzah, which we eat at the conclusion of the Seder. Yachatz reminds us that despite the world's terrible brokenness, it is more whole than shattered. We will begin the Seder with brokenness, but we will conclude the Seder with the psalmist's song of praise, Hodu, hallelujah. We begin with shattering, but we shall move towards envisioning the messianic age when tradition posits, no nation shall have soared up anymore. All peoples shall dwell together in peace, and none shall make you afraid. Right now, I am more keenly aware than ever of the brokenness of our world. Shortly after Passover, I shall enter into an office to which I have had the high honor of being named by President Joe Biden and unanimously confirmed by the Senate. I am honored and I am so grateful, but I am also keenly aware that it is an office that is made necessary by the brokenness of the world. I doubt, in fact, I know that I shall not erase that hatred or repair that brokenness. But deep inside me is the hope, the prayer that next year, when with God's help we gather again, we will be able to say that because of the work I have been privileged to do, the world is a little bit less shattered, less broken. The matzah we break cannot be repaired. The world we inhabit can be repaired. It is in our hands to do so. The ritual of Yachatz challenges us to make what is broken whole. May we and may I be worthy of the task.
Thank you, Deborah. This brings us to Magid, the beating heart of the Seder, when we begin retelling the Passover narrative. It begins, as the First Lady recited, with an invitation. Let all who are hungry come and eat. Kol dichvin yete ve'echol. And from there, the text transitions to the most well-known part of the Seder, known as the four questions, Ma nishtana. Who better to introduce the Ma nishtana than actress, producer, director, neuroscientist, and host of Jeopardy, Mayim Bialik. Mayim, virtual floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Very honored to be here. Introducing the four questions, indeed, one of the most well-known aspects of the entire Seder, as well as the most notable portion of the Magid section of the Seder. The Seder is crafted in the tradition of the great philosophers and thinkers of ancient Greece who had elaborate symposia which would involve decadent food and hours of conversation. The Magid is the heart of that. The Jewish people over time adapted this practice to incorporate Talmudic interpretations of arguably one of the most famous stories of our people, the exodus out of slavery from Egypt into freedom in the promised land of Israel. We are at a time in history yet again, where the story of exile and exodus is upon us as the world watches a war play out in Ukraine, a country where many of my own ancestors and many of our ancestors fled just a few generations ago. They say every Jewish question has several answers, and I guess as host of Jeopardy, I know a lot about questions and also a lot about responses. And they say where there is one question, Jews will have at least two answers. There are many questions to be asked about our global as well as communal responsibility to the people of Ukraine and the people of all nations who still suffer and are not free. Suffice it to say, the lessons of the Seder and the struggle for freedom, which Passover embodies, are as true now as they were thousands of years ago, when our people fled oppression in the hopes of something better. It is a great honor to introduce the students of the Shefa School. The Shefa School is a Jewish community day school in Manhattan, serving students in grades 1 through 8 who benefit from a specialized educational environment in order to develop their strengths while addressing their learning challenges. They specifically serve students with language-based learning disabilities who have not yet reached their potential levels of success. And these students are going to help us with the 4 questions. Chag Pesach Sameach.
Why is tonight different than all the other nights? What do you mean?
I can explain.
Different from all the other nights. Well, it's not every night you sing for the White House. Happy Passover!
Thank you, Shefa School. We are so happy that you sang for the White House. And I know that you did a remarkable job, and the Jewish Americans around the country are proud of you. We're now deep into the Maggid section of the Haggadah. And we are deeply fortunate to have with us Rabbi Dr. Ari Berman, president of Yeshiva University, the flagship Jewish university. Some of you might have heard about Yeshiva University over the last several months because of its men's basketball team, which won 50 consecutive games over the last few seasons. Tonight, Rabbi Berman will not be talking basketball, although I'd love to have that conversation. But he is joining us from Israel, where he is celebrating Passover with his family, and will share some thoughts about the Maggid section. Rabbi Berman, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Hanan, for that wonderful introduction. President Biden, First Lady Dr. Joe Biden, Vice President Harris, Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff, and all of the distinguished representatives of the American Jewish community who are participating in this wonderful and meaningful Seder. It's such an honor to be here with you today, towards the evening, at this very fitting moment. For having a Seder at the White House is actually very fitting. For an our tradition, we know that America has played such a key role. And the American society, the story of the Exodus, has always been a part of our founding narrative. You know, from the very beginning, the story of freedom and liberty has resonated so strongly in our country. And all of our great leaders have often been compared to the leaders of the Exodus, from Presidents Washington to Lincoln, great influential leaders, from Harriet Tubman to Martin Luther King Jr., all have been compared to Moses at the Exodus. And so the story of how we transmit the story of the Exodus isn't just of interest to Jewish Americans, but to all Americans. How do we tell over the story on this night? We're at the section of the Maggid where we're telling over the story. And we tell over the story with songs, and we tell over the story with discussion and intergenerational questions and answers. And one of the aspects that requires some explanation is that if you go through the whole story, the whole text of the Haggadah, the whole story that we tell over on this night, there is one person who is never mentioned. Who is never mentioned in the text of the Haggadah of the story of Exodus? It is Moses. Moses is never mentioned. Why is Moses absent? Where is Moses? And I think the answer to this question is the secret of the Seder. For we know that the story of the Exodus isn't just a one-time happening in history, but it's a story that recurs from generation to generation. There are people who seek liberty, souls who crave freedom, and pharaohs who seek to oppress. And what we teach is that Moses isn't in the text. Moses has a seat at the table. For you are Moses. Everyone at the table is Moses. Each one of us carries the responsibility not to seek limelight, but to stand for leadership, to not be able to stand idly by when justices and injustice occurs, and to seek to inspire all those around us and generations to follow. What we do at the Seder, at this section of the Maggid, is we teach ourselves and we transmit to the next generation, to our children, that they are the Moses for their future. And they need to carry that responsibility and that sense of meaning and purpose. And we know that through carrying on this Seder every year and every generation, that we are confident in the next generation, that they will carry on our mission and the purpose, and that whatever new challenges arise, and they will arise, that the table will be reset, the story will be retold, and a new Moses will emerge, as it has been, as it always will be.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi Berman. And I hope you get some sleep. It is late in Israel. We're going to dive right into the next part of the Seder, where we are fortunate to invite the Jewish cadets at the West Point Jewish Chapel Choir to sing a rendition of Dayenu. That was fantastic. Thank you, West Point Jewish Chapel Choir. We're going to take an easy pass now through the next few sections of the Seder. Rachza, the ritual washing of the hands. Motzi matzah, the blessing and eating of the matzah. Maror, where we eat the bitter herb. Korech, where we combine the matzah and bitter herbs into a sandwich. And that finally brings us to Shulchan Orech, the point in the Seder that most everyone looks forward to, eating the meal. In lieu of chowing down on some food, we thought, what better way to tip our hat to this section of the Seder than to invite James Beard, award-winning author and culinary scholar, Michael W. Twitty, to teach us how to make one of the symbolic foods associated with the Seder. So take out your notes, make sure to jot down the ingredients as Michael Twitty takes the virtual floor from his kitchen.
Hello, everybody. I'm so honored and excited to be here. Today is, of course, the day where a lot of us are prepping our kitchens and cooking, and everyone's houses really smell really great at the moment. And so for me, haroset is like one of the key foods that really tells a story about what Pesach means. Now, of course, at my Seder, which is going to be a very kosher soul style Seder, we're going to have West African inspired brisket, and we're going to have collard greens, and we're going to have rice, because I eat kitniot, some Sephardi practice, and so many other things. Megina, the meat pie that my rabbi and Rebbetzin taught me how to make many years ago as part of a Sephardic congregation, which is made from lamb and onions and matzah. But, you know, the harosas that I make are part of, you know, my weekly diet. You know, you can't eat anything for breakfast on Pesach. You know, there's no cereal. You can eat the awful cereal, but you have to eat fresh things. So a week of haroset for most people means apples, wine, nuts, spices. And then there's another haroset that I make for the Seder. I have two Seder plates. One is the traditional Seder plate with the parsley or boiled potato, or, you know, the shank bone, et cetera. And the other Seder plate represents my heritage as an African American, a Jew of African American descent. And that haroset is cinnamon and pecans and molasses. And so you're wondering, why those three things? One, on that African American Seder plate, there's symbols that represent the journey of enslaved Africans to freedom. The molasses represents the transatlantic slave trade. Sugar brought more people into enslavement than cotton or tobacco. The other one is pecans. When our ancestors came to the American South, they had to make their exile work. They had to find a way to survive. They had to find a way to overcome. Passover is very special to me in more than one way. It's my favorite holiday. It's certainly a holiday that brings us to an acknowledgement of the beauty of our American Jewish community. Only here do we have the opportunity to see so many different people from so many different backgrounds. And their haroset may be made out of dates. It may be made out of Asian pears. It may be made out of a plethora of ingredients, but it represents our uniqueness and diversity and wholeness as a people. Passover in particular is important for me because I believe the food in our traditions, Jewish, African American, are forms of text. They're how I tell my version of both people's culinary histories. And I want to share with you a very special story that's near and dear to my heart before I conclude. On April 9th, 1865, it was a Sunday, and my great-great-grandfather was enslaved in Virginia, where I currently live. And he happened to live down the road from a little town that we come to know as Appomattox. And he came there with his brother George. His name was Elijah, all coincidence implied. And Elijah and George were there with their soon-to-be former slaveholder. And they were told, as General Grant and General Lee left the courthouse, they were free. They immediately got on a horse and told everybody, you're free. Not to their knowledge, but to my knowledge, 150 plus years later, April 10th, that night was the eve of Pesach, 1865. So for my great-great-grandfather Elijah and so many other people who were bound in slavery for 200 plus years in America, the nightmare was over and he was there to witness it. And how beautiful it is that the story that inspired enslaved African Americans, that story was retold the very next night, the eve of Pesach, 1865. So in his honor, I offer you some haroset. You're welcome to come to my table and sing Go Down Moses together. Because what I love and appreciate about Judaism is not only that we eat and we celebrate, but we use that time to tell the stories and tell truths that are vulnerable, that we might not others share. And I'm so grateful to be present here at this event, to share my great-great-grandfather's story, to share some of my minhag, and to wish you all Hag Sameach.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chef. We're almost at the tail end of the Seder. We've retold the story. We ate delicious food. We're 2 glasses of wine deep. The kids found the afikomen. We're tired. It's late. One of your great uncles already fell asleep at the table and you're told not to bother him. What better time than now, perhaps at its most difficult, to express gratitude? That is what Hallel is about. And that is what Shuli Rubin Schwartz will delve into right now. Chancellor Schwartz is the chancellor of the Jewish Theological Seminary, one of the world's preeminent centers of Jewish higher education. Chancellor Schwartz, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Hanan. As we all know, the Passover Haggadah commands us not only to tell the story of the Israelites' journey from slavery to freedom, but also to actually feel as if we were personally freed from bondage. The Haggadah purposely cultivates a sense of moral responsibility toward those suffering in our own day. This year, like so many of you, and like we've heard many times this evening, I can't think about the Passover story without thinking about the people of Ukraine fleeing a violent invasion perpetrated by a modern day tyrant. I'm especially thinking about Ukraine because it was exactly 100 years ago, in April 1922, that my great-grandparents fled their home in what is now Ukraine, also in the face of violence. My great-grandfather, who was an educator and a journalist, left a diary of his experience. He described the sadness of leaving the only home he had ever known, even as he acknowledged that he was fleeing a place where he and his fellow Jews were hated and persecuted. I think he captured the anguish of refugees everywhere when he wrote, "Nobody desired to go, but everybody had to go. And when somebody flees, there's no question where to. Where your feet carry you, where you have the possibility." My great-grandparents arrived in the United States. Thank God they had that possibility. And thanks to their bravery and determination, and to the blessing of living in a democracy, our family has flourished. As we recite the Hallel, or songs of praise to God, during this part of the Seder, let us offer gratitude for the gift of our ancestors landing in this country, where they could retain their cherished traditions while participating fully in a free society. My family is not unique in having ancestors who emigrated from Ukraine. Thousands, hundreds of thousands of American Jews share that history. Watching innocent Ukrainians fleeing for their lives, we think of relatives who fled some of the very same cities that are now in the news every day. We're thinking too about the Ukrainian Jewish communities of today, communities that have been lovingly nurtured and revitalized. We pray that these communities one day will flourish again. Now, as we praise God for the miracles of Passover, for bringing us from slavery to freedom, from darkness to light, may our gratitude inspire us to continue God's work in this world. Just as God heard the cries of the Israelites, may we hear and respond to the cries of the people of Ukraine and all those whose lives are embittered and who yearn for freedom. What better way is there to express thanks for our own good fortune? Chag Sameach to everyone.
Working off of the Hallel theme, thank you very much, Chancellor Schwartz. The Hallel portion of the Seder is also when we sing and we sing and we sing. Who, in the Jewish American community, is better positioned to break out into song than a member of the Platt family? And not just because it's television and theater producer Mark Platt's birthday, though happy birthday, Mark. Jonah Platt is a TV, film, and Broadway actor who joins us from a studio where he's currently in rehearsals. Jonah will be singing a rendition of Hodu, performed originally by the late, great Debbie Friedman. Jonah, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Hanan. It's such an honor to be here with all of these distinguished guests and with all of you at home at our virtual Seder table. I hope if you recognize this melody that I'm about to sing, you'll sing along at home or harmonize with me wherever you are as we bring our community ever closer together. Hodu Adonai ki tov, ki le'olam chasdo, ki le'olam chasdo. Yom Arna Yisrael, ki le'olam chasdo, ki le'olam chasdo. Yom Runa, Beit Aaron, ki le'olam chasdo, ki le'olam chasdo. Yom Runa, Yirei Adonai, ki le'olam chasdo, ki le'olam chasdo. Let all who revere God's name now say, ki le'olam chasdo. Give thanks to the Lord, for God is good. Ki le'olam chasdo. Hodu l'Adonai ki tov, ki le'olam chasdo, ki le'olam chasdo. Chag Sameach.
Thank you, Jonah, for that beautiful performance. Thank you. And thank you to all of our guests from around the country for those inspiring words and beautiful songs. I also want to say thank you to the amazing White House staff who worked so hard to make this event possible. Thank you all for your dedication, your energy, and your creativity. And last but not least, I want to thank you all, the thousands of Jewish Americans from all walks of life who joined us this evening. We hope this event inspired you as much as it inspired us. And I now have the honor of doing one of my favorite things, and that's introducing my wife, our Vice President, Kamala Harris.
Well, thank you, Doug, the first Second Gentleman of the United States. Greetings, everyone. Greetings. It is so good to be together. I want to thank, of course, our President, Joe Biden, for bringing us together. And to all the members of Congress who are with us, thank you as well for your leadership and your great work. And to everyone, thank you for making this evening possible. For countless generations, people have gathered around the Seder table to be reminded of the power of faith and of the resilience of the human spirit, to relive the journey from oppression to freedom, and to find comfort in this story of hope and redemption. This year, it is an honor to gather once again to celebrate this sacred holiday and to renew our shared commitment to fighting for all those who are not yet free. Tomorrow night, our family, like so many families in the United States and the State of Israel and around the world, will return to the Seder table. Doug and I will host a Seder at our home with some of our Jewish staff members, and we are both looking forward to it very much. As I told the President of Israel when I spoke with him earlier today, we believe it will be the first Passover Seder ever hosted at the Vice President's residence. Thank you all again for joining us, and from our family to yours, happy Passover. Thank you again. There's so much to think about in terms of the blessings we have all received. Happy Passover.
Happy Passover.
Next year in Jerusalem. Take care.